Whew, I didn't think we were going to make it. My goodness. Welcome, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. It is the 23rd of May, 2018, and this is the Promotional Malpractice Live Chat here on MMAfighting.com. I apologize for the tardiness, but I did some updates to my computer and changed some of the gear, and it just fried all of the settings, but I managed to get it back going again. But we are running off Wi-Fi, not a hard line, because something's up with the hard line. So Comcast, I'm on my third new router. You're the best. In any event, a lot to get to today, including but not limited to the new ESPN and UFC, I would say all-inclusive global deal. Not global in the sense of running around the world, but in terms of all UFC content that's really not on pay-per-view or I suppose on Fight Pass. So that's remains to be seen what will be left of that. But nevertheless, the new television deal in its totality is on ESPN. Man, what a major coup that is. The deal's not perfect. There are some limitations. I do have some concerns, but nevertheless, it is pretty remarkable what they managed to pull off in this kind of climate. So we'll get to that. There's UFC Liverpool this weekend. And of course, there's a host of issues that remain beyond that. I'm hoping that this connection's not too bad, but it might be. It might be. Well, it just is what it is. How about this? Let's turn that off. Okay. Well, whatever. All right. Best place to get your questions in, going to be on two spots. One of them is going to be on the comment section of MMAfighting.com. I can see it's a little laggy. What can I do? And on the other side, it'll be on Twitter. At LThomasNews is my Twitter feed, and you can send me a question using the hashtag #ChatRappers. And yes, I'm wearing the Caps jersey, which I know is a very loser thing to do. Number one, I'm a loser. And number two, it's been good luck. The 2 days I've actually worn it in games that I felt like they really needed to win, they did. So I'm going to keep wearing it until I have a reason not to. And I might after today, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. So we'll see what happens. All right. Without further ado, let's get these questions going, shall we? And by the way, of course, today's live chat, not officially brought to you by in any capacity whatsoever, but nevertheless, I will consume Coca-Cola Zero. All right. Jesus, what a start to the day. My word. It's just never easy around here, is it? You work from home, man? You are on your own. Good Lord. All right. Oh, how did I know this would be the first question? All right. I'll say what I can say, which is not a whole lot, but I will read your question in good faith and tell you what I can, but you will be, I'm sure, unsatisfied with the response. Nevertheless, the first question, Ariel's leaving MMA Fighting, which is not news to everybody, but someone asks, Luke, it seems that MMAfighting.com has been quite tight-lipped on the biggest news story, which is Ariel, of course, going to ESPN. Considering MMA Fighting's bread and butter seems to be video content, and Ariel is obviously the face of that content, what consequences long-term does the website possibly face? You know I cannot possibly comment on that. Someone says, personally, I would like MMA Fighting picked up by some of the talented Sherdog guys like TJ DeSantis and Jordan Breen, who are completely underutilized under the new Sherdog ownership. Well, I don't think they're under Sherdog's ownership at all anymore. Maybe DeSantis is, but I don't think Breen is any longer. And as it relates to MMA Fighting's issues and challenges as they move forward, y'all know I can't say much. Right? You know I can't say much for a lot of reasons. One, I think there's a lot of things still in motion. It's a fair way to describe it. Two, I certainly do not have all the information. I'd be lying to you if I even tried to suggest as much. And three, I'm not really authorized to talk about whatever it is that I do know or whatever else might be happening. I can't speak on behalf of the site. I know it's probably been a little bit weird for people who are dedicated viewers of the site. We certainly appreciate your patience. I know I can say that. I know I can say there are some updates we'll have, I'm sure, one way or the other on this site pretty soon. The one thing I would say about it that I can just speak to without much of an issue, and again, I'm not like a representative for the site in terms of the, like, I'm not speaking to you as like the foreperson of the jury. What I would say is, look, MMA Fighting is a really important property for Vox Media, and MMA Fighting is something Vox Media has done really well for a long time, even prior to MMA Fighting's arrival. Remember, it was 2 other sites before. I think combat sports generally is something they do really well. And with MMA Fighting in the fold, that's not going to change. The excellence you expect, I think, will be continued. I think it will be absolutely continued. It's an important property for the company, and it's something we already do well. It's something we've historically done well. We've done even better, of course, when MMA Fighting came over from AOL and with Ariel there. And sure, I think some changes are in order, but I would anticipate that you are going to continue to get a pretty great product, one way or the other. And what that product will look like, I'm going to ask for some continued patience. Again, I don't really know everything, so we'll just leave it at that. A lot of moving parts. So thank you for your patience. I would ask for a little bit more of it, and this will all be resolved in time. It has to be resolved eventually, right? Like, it's going to come to some kind of conclusion. So let's just see what happens. Yes. And again, I know it's frustrating, but I'm limited in what I know, and I'm limited in what I can say. And I think that's probably enough. It's just good things are coming. Please be patient, and we'll hopefully deliver those to you. With MMA Beat Show, will the MMA Beat Show continue? It's my favorite MMA news show, and I hope it continues, blah, blah, blah. Again, same thing I would respond to is there are some things I know, some things I don't, but we will continue to deliver to you a very high-quality product, and the kind you can rely on, the kind you can enjoy, the kind you can trust, the kind you can bookmark and rely upon and look to, for sure. For sure. That much I can say. I know you're going to be like, oh, that's terribly unsatisfying. What do you want me to say? I'm not the authorized speaker, and there's details I literally don't know. So, like, big ones. So, I'm not equipped to give you the kind of answer that I think you guys are looking for at this moment anyway. But in due time, friends, in due time. Oh, my God, there's like a million of these questions. Good Lord. Jesus, there's a million. Christ, there's like 30 of these. I mean, you can read the speculation on there for yourself. Some of it's funny, some of it's interesting. Again, more questions about the MMA Hour, more questions about the beat, more questions about talent, all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff that I can't talk about. Oh my God, it's like 50 of these questions. Speculation that I could work with Loretta Hunt. Speculation I could work with Brendan Schaub. I'd love to work with Brendan Schaub. That'd be great. Someone says this will obviously never happen. Well, I'll never say never, but you're right, not anytime soon. But the times we have been able to get them together are magical. Yes, me and Brendan have a good relationship. I like him very much. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, but hey, that's life, right? And yeah, I'd love to work with Brendan in some capacity in the future, but for now, probably not in the cards. Oh my God, like literally 50 questions, no, more than that, are all just about this. Guys, I know it has to be frustrating to know like that there's a certain amount of uncertainty. You just have to be a little bit more patient because it's not an easy, the next chapter forward for the site is, as you can well imagine, is important, and getting it right matters, and getting it right has to be done the right way. So let's just give everyone in the position to make a change the freedom and space to do it, and this will all come to some kind of conclusion. There's some nice comments about me in here. There's some mean ones. You can read them all for yourself. Jesus Christ. It's literally 70 comments are all about that first one. I'm sorry, guys. I just don't know what you want me to tell you. I can't go into any more detail than I have. In part because I literally can't, and in part because I'm not allowed to. All right, so let's jump to the things that we can talk about so we can make some reasonable use of this chat. UFC and ESPN audience awareness. Hi, Luke. How much do you think UFC going all in on UFC will raise MMA awareness for the wider sports watching demographic? In my opinion, one key aspect will be channel awareness. In many bus stations, bars, airports, business lobbies, pubs, and sit-down restaurants, someone lists Outback or Applebee's, there's a pretty good chance that at least a few TVs are always on ESPN. But in my experience, if you ask to switch to Fox Sports 1 or, God forbid, Fox Sports 2, most service staff and bartenders have no idea which channel even carries it. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit easier with DirecTV where the channel numbers don't change place to place, but point taken. Currently, the most promotion I see for non-Ronda, non-Conor content outside the MMA bubble is when UFC Fox FS1 highlights hit YouTube's trending list. Does that change with this deal? First of all, it's a great question. It's a great question. I believe that there are some pluses to this deal and there are some minuses to this deal, which we can dig our teeth into. But this is definitely going to be one plus. I mean, ESPN is a much higher rated network. Certainly has a greater degree of visibility, I think, with sporting audiences. It has more premium content, I would argue. In fact, I was thinking today, and this will vary based upon your tastes, but I don't really watch a whole lot of baseball, and what I do would probably be the Nationals. They'll air for a national game on ESPN or something. I think occasionally they'll make their way to FS1. I don't know quite all the rules, but most of the home games are on a channel we have here called the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network, or MASN. So in other words, I get like the vast majority of my baseball viewing needs satisfied by those two channels. I don't watch motocross. I don't watch racing sports. I don't watch pro wrestling. I know they signed a big deal for SmackDown on Big Fox. I'm just saying. I'll watch the World Cup, okay, but you don't need them for the World Cup if you want to watch in Spanish, if that's your thing. And I was thinking, after this deal goes into place, will I really watch FS1 anymore? Right? I mean, what would I watch it for? I suppose for Champions League, but they're moving to Turner, and that concludes, at least for this season, on Saturday. So it's not really clear to me what I would watch on there. Now, someone brought up Bundesliga. Bundesliga is on FS2 and FS1 on occasion. All right. I think the women's national team in soccer will go on there. The men's national team on occasion will be on there, but even that's kind of split. Point being is it's a pretty significant downgrade. And it tells you, like, why was I watching FS1 to begin with? Merely because of its association to MMA and UFC. You remove that, I don't have much of a hook. That's not the case with ESPN. ESPN, for me, and again, your mileage will vary here on this one, but I don't really watch it I watch it a whole lot independent of the fact that there's MMA. I watch basketball games on there, Monday Night Football game, depending, or I know people bag on it, but you know what? One of my favorite things to do is I love to, on a Saturday night, pull up a nice cold one. I love watching highlights on SportsCenter, especially during college football season when you can get all the big plays all at once. It's a fun thing for me. I like Scott Van Pelt's show. I like watching Dan Le Batard on ESPN News in the morning. He had Mina Kimes on the show today. I like watching The Jump with Rachel Nichols. Get Up, I could live without. But the point being is, there's plenty of reasons for me to watch that channel. Highly questionable. Even on occasion, I'll give those two curmudgeons down the road here in DC, PTI, a shot. It's just got more marquee programming. It's got a bigger audience. It's the worldwide leader in sports, man. And so I think being on those chain of networks, depending on how they do it, will offer a degree of visibility more generally because you have access to a bigger audience. But I think also on top of that, there's just a degree of it makes the awareness of your event easier to come by, because the channels that people just sort of rely upon more generally will be more frequently showing this. Now, I do think we have to manage our expectations a little bit, because you're going to have 10 of those events on ESPN exclusively, the 12 from pay-per-view. And by the way, still going to do 12 pay-per-views? Yuck. No thanks. Oh, God. I was really hoping they would fix that. I mean, if they get rid of Face the Pain and they get rid of The Ultimate Fighter, I will consider that substantial progress. But 12 pay-per-views a year, it's still, man, that's just not in any way interesting to me. So that's a bit of a problem. However, as I mentioned, the 10 shows on ESPN, that's a lot, but are they going to go on ESPN News? Are they going to go on ESPN, the major channel? how are they going to do that? How are they going to work that out? Because remember, they have significant college football responsibilities. They have significant college basketball responsibilities. There's a lot. So I really wonder exactly how that's going to play out and where specifically things are going to go. So that's kind of interesting. The 20 on ESPN Plus, we'll see what happens with that. I think in the early stages of that deal, that's not going to be that valuable. But I think by the time 2022 or 2023 rolls around, that's going to be extremely valuable. I really believe I stream now, and my major complaints about it is that the toggling through the system is not quite as effortless as it is when you have a cable box and you're using the remote. But in terms of like the quality of the picture, I get 1080p on my screen when Comcast is cooperating. There's a lot about it that I like. And it's not really much of a trade-off. I get most of what I want. So yeah, I think one of the major upsides is that there's going to be all that stuff. Even if it airs on ESPN, it's going to be repackaged and purposed on SportsCenter and other highlight shows. ESPN and like look, the way in which it aired on Fox treated it better. Same thing's going to happen with ESPN. To the extent it airs on ESPN, ESPN's going to treat it better. And I think that's definitely going to be a major upgrade. Just the association with ESPN is really kind of important. Let me turn this fan off. It's blinding me. Hang on just a second. Good Lord. All right. Sorry about that. Again, one-man wrecking crew up in here. Someone says, good point. It's also something that hurts Bellator. Nobody knows what the Paramount Network is. Aside from Spike being a much cooler name, it had a loyal following. I think they lost some of that when they changed the name. They've also changed the programming. Did you guys see who's getting Paramount Network first in Europe? It's Spain. Spain is getting it first. And the way they're booking that is as a channel based on scripted series and documentaries, one which can tout not only its younger audience, but its sizable female audience. I'm telling you, Paramount Network, whether it is España or whether it is here, Bellator's not a good fit for it. And I think Bellator is still living in some of the remnants of what Spike TV used to be, where you're having, I think they still have Ink Master, or they're having the show where that guy yells at people who have shitty bars. Is it Bar Master? What I don't know, I don't forget what it's called. But point being is, those things are like bridge content that the kind of content that could and did conceivably live on Spike and also live on Paramount Network. But it's sort of in that in-between space, whereas like the Waco series is pretty clearly designed for a Paramount Network audience. Bellator's on the other side, where it's like it's just it was the kind that made sense for Spike, and Spike became Paramount Network. But when it became Paramount Network, this fit with Bellator just didn't make nearly as much sense. The question is, where do you put it? And I don't really know the answer to that. But to your point, are people going to put on Paramount Network on a bar? Maybe. I suppose it's always possible, but ESPN is just like, an effortless ask. It's the Kleenex, it's the Coke, it's everything in this country. I'd also be curious if there's a way to quantify the value of the UFC being on ESPN. What kind of lift in pay-per-view buys do they get from having the ESPN hype machine behind them? Really depends on to what extent the car wash benefits them, right? The car wash being when you go through and you're on Highly Questionable with Dan Le Batard, and PTI talks about you, and you're on First Take, and you're on you name it. And of course, they already have some of that. The question is, and they're on Get Up or whatever, and the Mike Goldberg or Mike Golick and Trey Wingo show. How much of that will be boosted by their relationship? Because they already do some of that, and how much does it help? A little. Obviously, it's better than nothing, but it's not clear that it's really, giving them some kind of significant upgrade. But if there's a real big effort to help them, I guess we'll have to, grade it separately at that point. Darren Rovell says that the UFC TV deal wasn't as much as they originally thought it was going to be. Yeah, he's right. The initial projections were for $450 million a year annually. Now, there's been a backtracking on that. Apparently, in 2016, when the Fertittas and they were trying to sell the UFC, that's what the deck they had presented looked like. The information, that's how it was contained. And they have since gone back, not the Fertittas themselves, but folks apparently familiar with the situation have said, well, 450 was always a little bit ambitious. Okay, well, what is a low point? I mean, look, you can say what you want. 300 million to me, I consider. I mean, it might be well short of 450 million, or even short of whatever managed expectation they had from that. I am telling you, $300 million annually to be on ESPN and then ESPN Plus in this climate, I find that to be a major win. It isn't to say there aren't real concerns about the deal or other factors that give you pause, because there are. But geez, that is, when they were looking at 175 to 200 mil from Fox, and they found a way to pull out another 100 mil. The question is, are they changing the project, the product, merely to get it monetized for a media company's purposes? In which case, is that a healthy change? That's a debate you need to have, and the conversation we need to have. I guess we'll have to see what happens, and ultimately how many events they do and what they look like and how things progress. That is something that's sort of in the back of my mind. It's like, okay, well, you were able to monetize this, but were you able to monetize it simply by carving it up and repackaging it in a way that serves their interest, but not mine as a consumer? I guess we'll have to see. But I think to get that kind of money on a network with that kind of visibility, and again, we'll see what it looks like ultimately in the end. Remember, 2/3 of those shows are going to be exclusive to their online streaming platform, but then you have the prelims or the pay-per-views that will air as well. It's compelling. It's compelling. It's very, very interesting. I don't know in the end if it provides some kind of super significant boost. Because ultimately, there was a lot of downsides to the Fox deal. I do think one of the major upsides to it was, I remember back in the day when the UFC would re-up with Spike, it was like $100 million deal for whatever it was, a year or two or something. Major news was touted, and the MMA media would laugh because they'd be like, this is major news that you re-signed with Spike. How is this major news? But it was major news, right? I mean, staying on television, finding a partner, doing that kind of thing and maintaining success was really important for them. But it was when they went to Fox, like one of the major benefits, and you can also argue maybe one of the major downsides depending on your perspective, but I would argue benefits was that they established themselves in the firmament of sports. I can recall very distinctly when you would go to websites for sports organizations and MMA or UFC was not in there, except it's like, oh, here's a profile on one person. Let's stuff it in other or something. And as part of the Fox deal, it just sort of became assumed that MMA was part of sports. I still think there's going to be you can present something however you want it. There's still going to be a natural distance between what it is and how people accept it. But in short, what I would argue is that has been pretty well established. ESPN's not going to do much to fix that. What they might be able to do is just put a few more eyeballs on it than normal, and then give it a little bit more of a prestige shine, but not so much a categorization change. That's the way I would think of that. Someone says ESPN Plus. What is their overall strategy of ESPN Plus? Are they trying to be the Netflix of sports? Too early to say. Netflix is producing 1,000 original shows this year. Netflix stocks keep going higher for now. Is the strategy? They're going to get swallowed by Amazon, by the way. Just you can mark that down. Is the strategy to gain market share of all sports content, and from there it's survival of the fittest for each show in sport, meaning whichever show does well gets renewed, the other one's canceled? It's a little too early to say because we need to see what else they're going to put on there. Certainly combat sports has been a bit of an interesting addition to that platform. And look, the UFC has to deliver on this deal after the 5 years. I don't think they'll just get re-signed by the grace of God. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of numbers they produce and how it works. It's sort of, to me, I had Liz Clark of the Washington Post on my radio show yesterday. She wrote a story on how NASCAR is being sold, and it was kind of interesting. Look, it would be very much foolish to look at some of the reasons that NASCAR is having problems and simply look at the reason why MMA has had a bit of at least in North America, a contraction, and say, oh, well, these are the similar things. There are some overlaps there, in part because of the major one was that the people in NASCAR just decided to put on more content than there was an appetite for and open up racetracks in places where there wasn't necessarily all that much of an interest. But, them dealing with infrastructure issues is not the UFC's issue. Like, they don't own the T-Mobile arena. They don't own Capital One arena. It's none of those things. So we don't have to worry about that. And also the recession hit their fan base harder. I'd also say that when I was a high school kid, I graduated high school in 1998, having a car meant freedom from your parents. It meant independence. If you had rich parents, which I did not, but if you did, those kids they got, brand new cars when they were 16. It could be a bit of a status symbol. I'm sure some of that is still in play, but my understanding is for millennials and then Gen Z, it's just not nearly the same kind of component. They don't need it. They don't view it with the same kind of, it was a momentous shift in your life as a kid, or as a high school kid anyway. So those things aren't the same, but I was just sort of looking and the oversaturation one's kind of interesting. And this deal does nothing to address that. So I'm kind of curious to see what kind of performance it has and what that will mean. But the ESPN Plus larger strategy, I think they're just going to build that portfolio over time and see how it goes, what works, what doesn't, what do they need, what matters. And remember, once you get a subscription model that works, not everything in there needs to work, right? So for example, how many bad shows does Netflix have, right? I would argue that the overwhelming majority of Netflix content is shit. It's really bad. It's very much not good. But they've got a few gems on there, depending on what your preferences are, right? My wife watches some Japanese dating show called Terrace House. Apparently, this is all the rage. They had that renewed series or the remake of the old series, Lost in Space. Apparently, that was a big win for them. You can go and watch Rogue One on Netflix right now. You can watch Doctor Strange if you're a Marvel Comics fan. Just pick something you liked on Netflix in the last few years. They only need to get a few things to really get you hooked because those programs serve as some kind of hooking anchor. And then this promise of constant content updates is really is a powerful mechanism to keep you interested. But does everything on there need to be a hit? No. In fact, they'll spend a ton of money on things that will totally bomb. Think of all like the Amy Schumer. Was that an HBO special or not? I can't remember. But think about how many comedy specials they have that probably don't do all that well. It doesn't matter. The point being is once you get somebody inside that subscriber model, not everything needs to hit, but offering this, panoply of this cornucopia of content, right? Where you have all these things. You could say if you're ESPN, I'm just going to make stuff up. We've got cricket, we've got rugby, we've got soccer, we've got football, college, NFL, MMA, boxing, lacrosse, ice hockey, whatever they can reasonably find a way to put on there in some capacity or the other. Then you begin to say, well, do we need UFC specifically? Maybe they do really well, maybe they don't. But if they don't, they still serve a function in terms of that $5 a month. So for $5 a month, I have choices. I work at SiriusXM. I don't listen to half the channels on there. But if I wanted to, the service that I pay for every month, because I actually pay for my own account, I can choose. Look, all the choices I have. There's music channels, talk channels, sports channels, all different kinds of stuff. That's what you're thinking there. Does every single show need to be Howard Stern? Nope. It's the general subscription model. It's the choices. And once you have that nice portfolio built up, you have a little bit of freedom to experiment. You just need a few hits and you're good. You're good. That's all you need. And Netflix operates the exact same way. It's why the subscription model is so much better in certain ways, because you're not reliant upon like everything killing it. Let's see. All right. Let's go back here. Luke. Okay. Luke, do you consider yourself a person of color? If it's too personal of a question, then no worries. I'm also a mixed race person who can usually pass as white, and the perspective from a similar person would be helpful to me in trying to piece out racial identity versus perceived racial identity in regards to my privilege in this country. I don't know if you're trolling me or not. I do not consider myself a person of color. Do I have it nearby? As a matter of fact, I do. I'll get it sometime later. I got my mother's Lebanese passport up there. You could see it, and you could judge for yourself whether I'm a person of color. My mother was Armenian, right? Born in Aleppo, and then I've talked about this before, and then moved to Lebanon back when Beirut was As you guys well know, the Paris of the Middle East, right? So, but no, I've actually done the 23andMe testing, and it would show what you would basically expect to show. It was a ton of familial roots in Northwestern Europe, and then a lot sort of in that Mediterranean, Indo-European region. The Armenians, I don't know how exactly you would like to classify them. First Christian nation in the world, so something to consider there. But that, I don't know how much kind of racial dynamics that would really have. But nevertheless, no, I don't. I always mark white. But I do consider myself, what's the word? I don't consider myself a person of color. I think that would be a little bit silly. However, I do consider myself somebody who understands and is sympathetic to the immigrant experience, right? My mom did have an accent. My wife is an immigrant. My other side of my family are immigrants. They're all citizens, but that was a process, right? They came here by choice, and then went through. And I think that I have a affinity for the international world, is I guess the way I would put it, right? But no, I'm as white as they come, dog. All right. UFC fighters negotiating mid-contract. Is it just me, or is the UFC really trying to stomp this trend? Recently, it was the UFC 223 main event shuffle and Yair Rodriguez, but it seems like more fighters are asking for more money to take short notice fights, risky matchups, or bouts against overweight opponents. It also seems like the UFC is reacting more negatively to this tactic by either cutting fighters, benching them, or burying them on card placement. Do you see this getting more frequent going into the ESPN deal, where fighters, especially ranking squatters, double down on sitting out playing hardball? Boy, what an excellent question that is. Here is what I would say about that. That is interesting. Boy, they do not like being leveraged. They do not like being leveraged at all. Let's take two scenarios here. You alluded to one. I'll bring up another. The Yair Rodriguez scenario, and then the Anthony Pettis scenario. And they're different scenarios, but they share a certain similarity. In the case of Pettis, here was this really precarious moment for the UFC where they were needing some kind of an opportunity and a headliner. He could have served in that role. He asked for more money. They told him to go pound sand. And I think a lot of us looked at that and thought, why would they do that? I mean, he's serving a value to you, former champion. People know him. I don't know what kind of fight he would have put up against Khabib, but hey, that's your backup on 24 hours notice. It's a pretty great backup, all things considered. And they said, no, thanks. Right. And then you look at Yair and you say to yourself, okay, I don't quite understand what Yair's argument was, because part of it was like, if I'm going to fight him in LA, I want more money, but if I'm in Russia, I don't. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding him. There's pieces of the information there. I'm not in any way suggesting he's not telling the truth. I'm quite certain that he is, but there's just some things I don't quite understand. But they wanted him in LA and he wanted more money, and they said, go pound sand. To me, it's all pretty clear what they want to do, right? The UFC anyway. There is total copycat behavior in the fighter ranks when contagion spreads like crazy among them. They copy each other in how they fight. They copy each other in how they trash talk. They copy each other in how they interact with the media. They copy each other in every way that they reasonably can to get ahead, which you would expect. It's in rational behavior. Oh, is this person finding a way that works? Great. And to some extent, they've actually made inroads in that way. Before, a guy fighting out his contract and being vocal about it, and not necessarily like angry at the UFC, but pretty clear that they were going to use that opportunity to gain maximum leverage, that would have been seen as somewhat controversial. And now it's quite common because more and more and more and more guys do it. And I think the UFC has found a way to live with it, because I don't know how much they ultimately try to match any competing offer. There's still a big misconception that, you go and test your value on the free market. You might get more than what you did in terms of what the UFC's new offer might be. But if you get a major offer from Bellator, they might just let you walk. And you see a lot of scenarios like that. So it's not exactly that. Yes, your pay might go up, but not in the way in which, not by the mechanism you think it is. But my point is this: if they gave in to Pettis, or they gave in to Yair, or they gave in to somebody else, it would eventually find its way to the public, and then everyone would try it. And then where would you be? Now you'd be giving into something, and if you said no to them, to somebody else, not named Yair, not named Anthony Pettis, then that person, if they didn't get that, would say, well, what happened? Yair got it. So-and-so got it. I'm mistreated. I'm mistreated. Now, there still might go out and say I'm mistreated because they asked for money and didn't get it. But it's that at least you wouldn't have well, they did it for X, they didn't do it for Y. And I realize that phenomenon exists with Conor McGregor, but I think everyone kind of understands he's sort of in a category by himself. Point being is they don't want contagion to spread on this one. No. You want more money. You can do that when it's time to redo your contract, not when you have us in your mind over a barrel. They don't want to do that. The question for me in the ESPN age is, they are going to have Ariel. They've already got Brett. I think they signed Jeff Wagenheim. I'm curious about this, and I'm sure all those guys will do a very good job. I'm just curious to see what the coverage will look like if, like, in other words, I know that those guys are going to do their jobs, but what I am curious to see is to what extent the television arm of the product promotes their work and fighter antipathy, or these kinds of, I wouldn't call it strong arm tactics, but I would call it, they play hardball. It's all illegal, hardball. To what extent that gets extra push in the media as a consequence of them having this new in-house team and then this new in-house television deal. How much of that makes the rounds? Because on the .com, I'm sure all of it it'll all be known. I don't think there'll be any kind of editorial limitations in that regard. But I'd be curious to see what the television arm does with it, and that'll be something to notice. But like, what is UFC trying to do? They are trying to stop contagion before it spreads, big time. And then you get to the stuff about like, well, fighters need some kind of representation to make some rules about this kind of thing or some kind of protections. Man, I don't even know if they want that anymore, to be quite honest with you. People always positioned it like, well, it'll never happen because the fighters won't find a way to get along. But that's not the same thing as saying it won't happen because the fighters won't get along because they don't want it. Now I'm beginning to wonder if they even want it. I honestly don't know the answer to that. Before I would have said, well, of course, they obviously want it. Do they? Do they want it? I'm not so sure that they do. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm saying I've gone from a high degree of confidence that they do to very much not a very strong degree of confidence at all. That they literally think a better scenario is to not do that. That's not the same as, well, we all want it, but we just can't find a way to make it work. Do they even want it? Look at all this money that's being handed around, and do you see a lot of momentum for some kind of change? I don't see anything. I don't see any fighters speaking up about it, other than the ones who you know already, the ones like your Nate Quarries who are involved with the fighter lawsuit, or certainly Project Spearhead, right? And we'll see what Project Spearhead can do. I certainly understand. Look, I'm not trying to poo-poo their efforts at all. Believe me, I think they're on the right side of this issue. I'll be very clear about it. But do you see a lot of fighters speaking up? I honestly think they feel like, look, I know I can get paid if I just worry about myself. So why do I need a union? They don't. I wonder if they see it's in their interest. This whole time we've been operating under this assumption that everybody recognizes that it's in your interest. I don't know that they do. I don't know that they do. I don't know that they don't, but I would have said for sure before. Now, I don't know. I'm very curious. That I think we've been operating under some assumptions that are worthy of revision here, for sure. Can I say one more thing about this? You know what? I'll do it with this. The last UFC card on Fox. Any chance we see the dream team matchup of Rick Rickerson versus Donk Donkerson on the main event of that final UFC on Fox? Why would the UFC put anything half decent on Fox at this point? Oh, for sure they're going to go out, with not much of a bang. You'll recall at the end of the UFC deal, they did end with a high degree of confidence and good relationship in terms of the Ultimate Fighter, that 14th season. But there was just a lot of bad blood and a lot of putting UFC on at weird times. And there was a lot of interesting choices made. I don't think it'll be quite like that, but it'll end with a sort of unremarkable whimper. According to the Sports Business Journal, after that $205 million deal for SmackDown, I think that's the one they signed, right? You guys know better than me, but I think that's what it is. That at that point they sort of reevaluated what they were trying to get with UFC and just said, we're done here. So UFC was probably like, all right, well, we'll just upgrade to ESPN. But is it enough of an upgrade if only 10 of your shows are going to be airing in their totality on there? Plus, how are they going to broadcast it? Which leads me to my next point. ESPN has not done a great job historically with combat sports. Like their boxing stuff's getting a lot better. Their Lomachenko presentation's getting a lot better. Joe Tessitore is, I think, a super underrated commentator. Timothy Bradley's is okay. The other guy they have, his name I don't know, is okay. They have Max Kellerman, of course, but he's with HBO, so they can't really use him. So they don't have the ability to leverage all of their inside assets. It'll be curious to see who they bring over to do those kinds of broadcasts. My understanding is, from what I'm being told, UFC will still have a pretty significant degree of control over that, which I've mixed opinions on. On the one hand, that will just change. That will continue to have these editorial problems about the broadcast. On the other hand, they might make the broadcast good in a way that I don't know that ESPN can. So you have to take all that with a grain of salt, and count both perspectives there. But please, here's one thing that I'm very hopeful for. God, if there is a freaking God, ESPN is a much higher rated network, and ESPN2 and News even might be than FS1. They don't, not that they necessarily have the same demands, but Fox Sports 1 was putting on 6-fight main cards just because they had to fill airtime and to, I think, sell enough ad inventory. If they can pull that down to 5 or 4, a 4-fight main card that starts at like 9 p.m. and you're done by like 11, I swear to God, they can bring back Face the Pain. I would make that trade. I would make that trade tomorrow. You guys don't remember when the UFC was or some of you might, but when UFC was very briefly on FX, and they used to do UFC on FX, 4-fight main card starting at 9. Oh my God, it was the greatest. It was the greatest thing in the world. You're out by like 11, 11:30 if it went long. Not too bad on the East Coast, West Coast. You can go out to the bars after that. It was phenomenal. That's what I'm hoping for. Is can we please, for the love of God, bring back some sanity to the way in which we show these sports? Can we show them in a way that is like not inhumane to the audience? If they can pull that off, especially if you're streaming where you don't have the same kind of considerations, because so much of that streaming to me is like a step up from DVR, which I realize they're not the same thing. But what I'm saying is, if you're the kind of person that streams content, you don't have to watch it live. You just have to watch the stream after the fact, and all the numbers kind of feel the same. So like, airing it at a time that's appropriate for audiences, even if they aired it at 10 and it was 4 fights, I would live with that. But like if it was 9 o'clock, 4-fight main card, I mean, I would torch my house. I mean, I didn't torch it the first time, but I would torch it this time and then give whatever's insurance money to a charity of your choice. That's how happy I would be. Are you kidding me? Oh my God. Bizarro MMA. What are the best underutilized martial arts for MMA? You have to go back to the original UFCs. They would bring up stuff you never heard of. The couple guys who had like ninjutsu backgrounds, and they all got smoked. But like Caillou Rogai, Kung Fu or whatever. I don't know how underutilized they were, but they're not exactly overly represented. If you had to create a well-rounded MMA game without using the most utilized martial arts, BJJ, wrestling, kickboxing, Muay Thai, which ones would you pick? I'm not qualified to answer that because I know very little about traditional martial arts. Taekwondo, I suppose, might be part of it. And then maybe Japanese jiu-jitsu, but I don't know. Let's see. Wait, what? There are some losers in this world. All right. Let's see. Bizarro MMA. Oh, yeah, we're doing this. John Lineker. Hi, Luke. Been watching MMA for many years now. All right. And over time, my favorite fighter is John Lineker. As I mentioned, he's one of my favorite fighters. Is he one of your favorites? I don't have favorites. I guess we'll have favorites to watch, I suppose. No. But, I mean, I know what he's on the card. It's going to be interesting. So, yeah, I certainly hold him in high regard. But, like the fighters who I get, like, really up for when I watch would be, like, Tony Ferguson, Habib, when he's competing, John Jones. Not so much the stars because all those guys fight in interesting ways. Chiesa, Kevin Lee, Cody Garbrandt. Who are somebody that's not champion I get like really excited for? Hey, Tatiana Suarez did a great job on Saturday. That kid Dominic Reyes looked good. Things like this. Somebody who's either on the career come up or just fights in interesting ways. What do you make of him as a fighter relating to his style and his career path so far? I mean, there's 50 questions about them, so I'm going to answer this one and then move on. Do you think he has a ceiling as a fighter? I don't know. It looks like at bantamweight, he might be getting pretty close to it. I guess we'll have to see, although that win over Kelleher was really nice. But, we saw what he did against TJ Dillashaw, and he was just totally outmatched. These guys who can think and wrestle and switch stances and level changes, and their timing's incredible, and they've got a wide variety of weapons, and they're good athletes. They're going to be a handful for anybody, man. They're going to be a real handful for anybody. So no. What do you make of his style? I'll just say this about his style. One of the things that really impresses me is not merely his power, which of course is widely regarded as some of the best under 155 pounds in almost any weight class, but his chin's pretty rock solid too. It's a very action-friendly style, right? Because he throws wide hooks. He doesn't throw a lot of 1-2s down the middle. He just sort of he just bites down the mouthpiece a little bit, doesn't do a ton of head movement, although he gets a little bit out of the way. But he just sort of is he fights like the Incredible Hulk at 135 pounds. He just, just kind of overwhelms you in the end. It's pretty interesting to watch. People love him, and they should. He's a great fighter, but I wouldn't necessarily consider that appointment viewing for me. All right, I mean, there's 85 John Lineker questions here. I'm going to skip. UFC Utica. Someone says, fantastic card. Have you seen this card, Luke? I have not checked it out recently, but let's look at it now. UFC Utica. Utica. What do we got here? All right. Main event. Jimmy Rivera taking on Marlon Moraes. It's a good-ass fight. Gregor Gillespie taking on Vince Pichel. Another good fight. Walt Harris versus Daniel Spitz. I like Walt Harris. Jake Ellenberger versus Ben Saunders. Boy, that's a bit of a do-or-die contest, huh? Julio Arce versus Daniel Tamer. That's a good fight. Jean Vellante versus Sam Alvey. On your Fox Sports 1 card, formerly out of DC, I don't know if she still is, Sajara Eubanks taking on Lauren Murphy. Nick Lentz versus David Tamer apparently is on there twice. That's interesting. Bilal Muhammad taking on Chance Racontree. Desmond Green taking on Gleason Tebow. That's a fun fight. Jessica Aguilar on Fight Pass taking on Jody Esquivel. Johnny Eduardo taking on Nathaniel Wood. And Jared Brooks taking on Jose Torres. That's a good fight. And I'll say this. Jody Torres is a very good prospect. So I'm looking forward to him being on there. Am I being overly dramatic in saying it's one of the worst UFC cards in recent memory? Oh, you're being sarcastic. Top to bottom, I think it's barely a UFC quality event. And can you imagine if Rivera or Marlon got injured? Well, I think it's a little rough. But yes, if you lose that main event, you lose a major hook. It's got no excuses written on the poster. That's interesting. It's a little dramatic, I think. There are some interesting prospects on there. Outside of the main event, do you see any fights in this card that merit serious attention? Yes. I think Gregor Gillespie is a top prospect. But keep your eyes on him. But Vince Pichel, since coming back from that layoff he had, has looked pretty good. But Gillespie is another level. Let's see what happens to the Ben Saunders-Ellenberger fight. I don't know how much time those guys have left in the sport. David Tamer, whoever the hell he's fighting on this card, is always worth watching. So is Bilal Muhammad. And then I would also add that Shorty Torres on Fight Pass is going to be worth your time for sure. Someone says the Gregor Gillespie versus Vince Pichel fight. Yeah, I agree. Shorty Torres, I agree. And Nathaniel Wood. Oh, that's right. Nathaniel Wood from Cage Warriors. Keep your eye on him too. So yeah, there's some decent fights on there. I love this question every time. Define UFC quality. Clearly the bar has been lowered. Sure. There are a lot of problems with defining UFC quality, in part because the UFC has not made it very clear. It's like asking what's MLB quality. Well, it depends. Are you a pitcher? Are you a catcher? Are you an outfielder? Your position there will matter. How you bat and what order you bat in. Are you the kind of guy who's a home run slugger with a lot of strikeouts like Aaron Judge? Are you, a Tony Gwynn type? I mean, that's an exaggerated example, but are you more of like a base hitter? Are you a good base runner? Like, it really depends on the package deal you have to have. Now, look, there are some baselines there. You don't have to hit 30 home runs, but the closer you can get to that, the better. You don't have to bat 300, but the closer to that or above you can get, the better, right? Slugging percentage, and then you can look at all the various other metrics as well. All of that can fluctuate, but it's still basically somebody who not only competes at the highest level, but what I always call the common standard of excellence. It is, once you get to the bottom of the UFC's common standard of excellence and the top of the regional standard of excellence, it gets so blurry that at that point it can be too hard to parse. But to me, it's something like the top 25 in each weight class in the world. Not exactly when you get to some of the lighter divisions, some of the newer women's divisions. I think we'd have to probably pare it down there. But if you're somewhere in like the top 20 or so at lightweight, or top 20 at welterweight, even top 20 at light heavyweight, that's kind of the space that we're talking about. That really is it. So people like, well, CM Punk is nowhere near it. I mean, CM Punk isn't even the top one, maybe not even the top 1,000. I'm not even trying to be hurtful. I'm really not. Like, if you took up the best 1,000 welterweights and competing in MMA, I mean, dude, I know like BJJ black belts who are amateurs, right? Like, I mean, maybe that's an exaggerated example, but I don't think it's that crazy. Okay, 500, something like that. He's outside of it. It's just that's been all of my major issue. It's like, if he was inside the 100 space, I could maybe look the other way or something, but it's like absurdly far apart from everything else. And that it's a crime. Someone says, I listened to your radio show yesterday and I always figured you were more of a Tara Patrick or Brianna Banks guy than an Asa Akira guy. Francesca Jaimes too. All right. Someone says 165. No, thank you. Hi, Luke. There's been a lot of talk lately about a 165-pound division. And like you, I fall in the same camp as not wanting one below. Here are my main points as to why it's a bad idea. Number one, we already have a lot of divisions, and the casual fan has no idea who the champion is, making it will be more harder to distinguish the champs. I'm going to treat this like a true, false, true. Making 165 will also mean you have to make 175. What about the guys that naturally fit in well at 170? I have less of an issue with that, to be quite honest with you. My biggest reason not to do this is that it will drain the deepest and most exciting division in the UFC at 155. It will lose many of its top fighters, potentially Khabib, Tony, Vic, Felder, and others. Agreed? You're like, we have a great division. Hey, let's drain it. Okay. Creating these divisions will do nothing to stop extreme weight cutting. I think that's totally true. If Kevin Lee, as a fighter that cuts from 190, I mean, look at Mackenzie Dern. They're like, oh, we need 125 to help out with weight cutting. Did it help? Kevin Lee's a fighter that cuts from 190 and is only 25 pounds. So he's only 25. As his body gets older, he'll continue to hold more water weight and his cuts will just get harder. Why not just move to 170 like Jake Matthews? He does not need a division created for him. Agreed. Second example would be Kelvin Gastelum, and I am a big fan of his. He is a great fighter, but he does not have a weight cutting problem. He has a discipline problem. Just watch the UFC Shanghai weigh-ins. He barely made weight for 185. Someone challenges me on one thing. I've heard Luke say before that the top 50 at 155 are elite level fighters as opposed to women's flyweight, for example. Assuming this is true, there should be plenty of big 155ers who can move to 165 without draining the best talent pool at lightweight. Right, but here's the problem. You won't just drain 25 to 50. You might drain the top 10. They might all decide to move. So then you have a star power problem as well. Is that a good idea? I don't know. Wonderboy Till, who you got and why? I have to tell you, are you guys like me at all? Maybe you're not. I keep going back and forth on these two. Some days I feel like Till is just going to walk into him, overpower him, catch him moving one direction, put a right hook on him, something like that. I just keep seeing that right hook from Till, like a lean and then a right hook, and then catching him as he moves. Then other days I see Till getting overconfident and just getting crushed. I have gone back and forth on this fight over and over again. You look at that card, it's not a good card, but that main event is utterly sensational. It's so, so good. I think I'm going to lean Till. I am subject to his bravado. What do you want me to tell you? Like, I can make a case for why Till would win. I can make a case for why Wonderboy would win. How they match up, I don't know. How good Till is, I think we also still don't know. You know, beating Cowboy is very, very impressive, but beating Wonderboy is a very different, and I would argue in that weight division, a more difficult task. You know, Till looks to be the genuine article, but he's got to prove it. He's got to prove it. I'm one of these guys who, I mean, you can call me a hater if you want. I will view it more skeptically. Like, I can believe that Till can do this. There are certain people hey, you just can't beat Wonderboy. Till's not one of those guys. He can beat Wonderboy, but he's got to do it. He's got to go out there and he's got to do it. He's got to prove it. And I am very excited for that one. Very, 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 very big doings in that division. Frankly, it would also be better for that division if Till won, because you get some real momentum change, you know, and people who've had their shot at the title kind of get moved along a little bit. We all like Wonderboy, but just occupying that number one space because the rankings are so stupid is not good for anybody. So I'll flip a coin and just come up on the Till side, but I just have a hard time counting either guy out. It's a very hard fight for me to pick. Someone says, I think this will be too much too soon for Till. All right. Here is who Till has fought. Bojan Velikovic lost his fight after Till and is now in the PFL. Jessen Ayari 1-1 the UFC record. The dude he beat is 0-2 in the UFC. Nicholas Dalby. Most recent fight was an L in Cage Warriors. And then Wendell de Oliveira Marquez. Most recent fight was an L in ACB. This is hardly a murderer's row that would prepare you for the elite like Wonderboy. Just my 2 cents. Fair point. Totally fair point. He does not have a long track record outside of that Cerrone fight to show you that he can be somebody special. But what does that mean? Guys at that age get better fast. Very, very fast, you know. So he could be totally different by this point. You know, it's just incredibly difficult to say. But, you know, certainly Wonderboy is more battle tested against higher level opposition. I mean, there's no argument about that. But, you know, they're going to be fighting in Liverpool. It's going to be, especially if things go their way on Saturday, which I hope they don't. But if they do, it will be bonkers up in there. Can you give a prediction for the Wonderboy versus Till fight and give a breakdown? Well, I'm a little bit worried. Someone's asking what will happen if they win. I'm a little bit worried if Wonderboy wins. I mean, he's going to maintain that number one position. So then, what does he do? Does he fight Usman? Does he get a shot at the winner of RDA versus Covington? Does that fighter get the shot against Woodley versus Wonderboy? I mean, it's really hard to know exactly what will happen there. In the case of Till, it would make him number one contender behind that ultimately number one contender fight between RDA and Covington for sure. It would move him right to the front of the list, because as good as Usman's victory was, he would only beat the number 4 guy, and it was a dominant victory, but not the kind where it sort of lifted you out of your chair. If Till wins, it doesn't have to be because it's already ahead in the ranking spot. So for sure, that's where it would put him. In terms of the breakdown of this one, I'm going to pass on that one for the moment because I need to think about it some more. I need to watch a little more tape. But this is one of those fights where it's very easy to cobble a case for either guy. And whenever that happens, it's usually fireworks, right? I remember going into like the Shogun Hendo fight, very different fight, of course, but thinking, well, Hendo's really good at this. Well, that's true, but Shogun's really good at that. And like, well, how is that going to pair up? And then you saw how it paired up. It was absolute madness. I get a little bit of that vibe from it. Not that it'll be a brawl, but certainly an excellent back and forth. No real promotion around CM Punk's fight yet. Okay. Hi, Luke. I'm familiar with your views on Punk fighting the UFC, and I largely concur, coming from a guy who loved Punk's WWE run in this early decade. Okay. That said, we're in this situation, and it seems odd that Punk is getting no promotional push whatsoever. I haven't seen any media around it, especially compared to the huge push last time. So far, the push has been around Yoel and Whitaker, which is an outstanding fight, but drew badly last time, and I don't see it having changed significantly since then. Also, I don't know how the U.S. market works, but Punk versus Jackson seems like a great fight to put on TV, not on pay-per-view, since the WWE fan base is a TV-watching fan base, and it might be better there instead of pay-per-view. Someone writes here a few reasons. This is their reasons, not mine. One, WWE fans already know he's fighting. You still get the CM Punk chance in the WWE arena to this day. Also, remember, he's fighting in Chicago, his hometown, where I'm told he is very popular. So I think there's probably a general level of awareness he's competing, how much promotion they're willing to do behind it. Number two, maybe something to be do with the fact that UFC knows of the numbers of Punk's last fight. Three, if he loses again and looks ridiculous again, it will make the UFC look ridiculous for signing him again and putting him on a pay-per-view card again. Maybe they're aware of the likelihood, so restraining themselves and promoting the fight. I think it's the last one. They already promoted him. They've already done the story of like, here's a guy who's just trying to live out his dreams. How many times can you do that? They can't hang their hat on the event of the first one. You could say, well, he really wants to wash the taste out of his mouth from that, which I'm sure competitively he does and would be totally understandable. But is that something you're really going to sell pay-per-views on? I mean, there's not so much you can do except other than include his name, make sure it's visible on any kind of promotional material, have him do some interviews, fight week. Other than that, you're going to get what you get. But there wasn't, it wasn't like, Lesnar came very close to beating Mir. Very close. Like, you walked out of that saying to yourself, ooh, he's good. He's really good. There's something to that. And remember, he already had a pro fight before fighting Mir anyway. And of course, Brock Lesnar just had this look about him. There's just a lot of things you can't take from that first experience or the way he looks or anything and take it into the second one. But they did put him in his hometown. I think he's going to be, cheered. They're going to go crazy for him, which is cool, I guess. He's got an opponent that I think is a little bit better suited for him. Whether he'll win or not, I have no idea. Yeah, that's that. What else can you really do? What promotion is there? I just don't know. Someone says, I think the novelty has worn off. Yeah. If he had put in a good performance and lost, you'd be like, he lost to Mickey Gall. I mean, that's okay. But there was nothing there. So it says it's odd because the UFC is treating this like a fight they don't want to promote since it's a bit embarrassing to their brand. But at the same time, they're the ones who didn't let CM Punk out of his contract from going to competition. I wonder if Punk has the same deal as before, 500K plus pay-per-view points. Yeah, maybe. What are you really supposed to do? And you know what? Maybe CM Punk doesn't want to do much of media. If I was him, I wouldn't. Right? Focus on what you got to do. You got a big task. Remember, he's on this, and I 1,000% believe him that he's on a martial arts journey. That's really what this is. It's about self-improvement. It's about betterment. It's about chasing opportunity. All the things that everyone does. I don't think this is the best place for him to be doing that if he really wants to learn. That's just my opinion. I've made that pretty clear before. But I don't think this is some kind of bad faith effort. Yes, he's getting a lot of money for it, but I don't think it's a bad faith effort. I think it's a good faith effort. So forget about the media, right? Or, do the minimum amount that you need to be contractually in compliance or something and then just move on with it and just be done. Be totally done. But if I was him, I'd be focused on my work too, right? Get up there and get a win, man. You know how good that would feel? You could, stick in everyone's faces, all the haters, right? All the critics, all the skeptics. I don't know exactly what beating Mike Jackson would say. I'm not saying it wouldn't be anything. It would be something, but it's hard to know exactly what it would mean. But it would mean a lot to him. And that's all it really has to mean in the end, right? When you're at this level of the game, What it's about is it's about you. You know, when you're Conor McGregor good, when you're John Jones good, and you're out there beating the Daniel Cormiers and the Eddie Alvarezes of the world, well, then it's about you as well, of course, but it's also about the game itself. It's about the sport itself. It's about history. It's about legacy. But if you go to a regional fight card and it's a pro-am card, so they got like 10 pro fights, 10 amateur fights, and, you know, it's people that you know in your – I mean, this guy, oh, it's an electrician versus an accountant. Who's that for? I mean, maybe the pros are getting money and maybe some of them want to make the UFC, but look, the overwhelming majority of it is it's just about them on a martial arts journey. That's what it's about. It's about them. And it doesn't need to be about anybody else. It's about their team and their training and their aspirations and you know, trying to be something. At this level of where he's fighting, that's what it's about. So why does he need to do interviews if he doesn't want to? Why does he have to go do reality shows if he doesn't want to? You know, and if he does, okay, it's different. I'm just saying, like, when you're competing at this level, it's great because you have the freedom to just make it about you. And he should. I would be my strongest recommendation, in fact. An interesting question. Vasil Lomachenko versus Frankie Edgar in kickboxing. Boy, that is an interesting one. Because Lomachenko has a background in wrestling, a little bit of a background in judo. You know, I think it'd be a quick learner with kickboxing, to be honest with you. But that's a very interesting question. I'd have to think about that. That's a good one. Someone says it would be Vasil because Frankie gets hit too much and of the footwork of Lomachenko. But the footwork's different in boxing too. So I would go with Lomachenko too, but that is an interesting one. Owning content. Hi, Luke. I hope you're doing well. Brendan Schaub was talking on his podcast about the importance of owning rights to shows and podcasts. I know you have content you post on MMA fighting and content you post on your own YouTube channel. It's not too personal. Can you comment on any shows you personally own? Blah, 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 blah. Anything that goes on anything that goes on MMA fighting is theirs. And anything that goes on my YouTube channel is mine. Simple as that. Why don't you have a Patreon? I don't know. I might get one. Do you hate free money, Luke? No, I don't have free money. I don't hate free money. Tatiana Suarez. You recently did a video where the premise compared her to Habib. Well, I answered a question. The breakdown itself didn't really make the case. I wasn't trying to make the case. It wasn't my comparison. It was somebody else's. I just said it wasn't half bad. I wasn't trying to prove it. While she was able to blend folk-type wrestling, I think folk-style wrestling is what you mean, and BJJ against Grasso, her ground and pound wasn't exactly dynamic. Agreed. And she often had to land and hit mat returns or drag Grasso back down due to control in the position she had. Okay. Yes, but Habib's no different in that sense. It was unclear if your point was she's the closest thing opt for? No. If he is on the shelf for a year or two, where does this put him in the heavyweight picture? It might be the end of his career. He's 41 years old. No one's talking about that yet. If he gets a 2-year suspension, I mean, it's a big if. He's going to be gone for a while. Let's see what else. Do the fighters realize how crazy they look by not coming together and fighting for their fair share of that $1.5 billion deal? I don't know what they know and what they think anymore, man. I really don't. You would think that they would be like, what? I don't think they think that, honestly. Could you imagine the NBA or MLB players getting used like this? No, I can't. It's just one of the more surprising things ever. As I mentioned before, it's one thing to be like, well, we can't get them to work together, but they all agree it's a good thing. No, that's not where we're at on this one. I don't know. I think we might be in a different spot. Your favorite active fighter outside the UFC or Bellator? Ooh. Well, I could have said Jordi Torres before. How about outside of Bellator, outside of UFC, eh? Maybe Kyoji Horiguchi, Tenshin Nasukawa, some of those guys out in Ryzen. Something like that. With perhaps a higher level of prestige associated with ESPN and Reebok finally starting to produce more quality personalized fight gear, do you think Reebok are now more likely to renew their arrangement with UFC when their deal ends? That's an interesting question. I don't know that Reebok can substantially improve what they're doing, nor do they care to. I don't know that they're capable of it, right? Is sort of the bigger issue here. But maybe being on ESPN, re-sweetens the pot. And then that also brings up the question of, if they do that, will the fighters do anything about it, right? Because if you were getting a paycheck and then they took a chunk out of it, well, then they get bitter. But if it's money they were never having, they can't imagine ever having it, right? So the TV money. And, it's a question of how much of that they would get, right? Would they get 50? Probably not, but you get the idea. How much of that would they get? More than they're getting now, but because it was never real to them to begin with, they just sort of can't fathom a world where they would have more of this. If everything is true about this ESPN deal, is it a win for your work, MMA fighting, all the other MMA outlets in terms of revenue, getting audiences, interviews, and such? Remains to be seen, but I have a hard time worrying about job security when the UFC has signed a $1.5 billion deal with ESPN. I'll put it that way. I have a very hard time worrying about job security one way or the other. True, false. The pay-per-view model is holding the UFC back in terms of growth. False. I don't think it's holding it back. The question is it properly, holding it back? No. The current way the pay-per-view model is implemented, like, in other words, you're saying the pay-per-view model, but there can be many different pay-per-view models. One of them could be we only do 6 shows a month, or excuse me, 6 shows a month, 6 shows a year, or 4 shows a year, or 20 shows. I mean, it's not merely a number there, but how many fights go on them, how they're structured, how they matter, who gets put on them. There's all different kinds of ways to structure pay-per-view. I don't think pay-per-view in and of itself is holding the UFC back, but I do wonder if the current way that pay-per-view is implemented has some kind of is maximizing their opportunity, as really is the way I would put it. Luke, when you have tech problems and you say, hey, what can you do? Do you really have no routes to fixing your tech problems? You want me to call Comcast on the air? Is that what you want me to do? Pull up Skype and then have a call with Comcast to fix this? I mean, yes, of course, over time, there are ways to fix this. I'm on my 3rd gigabit router because every time we have a storm, it fries the new one. So I have to keep getting that. I have a hardline run to this computer. I've read the specs on this computer. It's about as nice as they come. And I'm on a $1,000 camera here. So like I've got the gear, but I can't make Comcast work better than it does. I can't make them come to my house as fast as I would like them to. I am at their mercy. And if I plug in my hard line and my computer says it's not reading the Ethernet after we've had a series of outages because of storms, the same reason it blew the first 2 routers I'm inclined to believe that no, there is nothing I can do about it, at least insofar as this chat is concerned. Of course, I'm going to go and test it and do some troubleshooting. And if there's a problem that I can't fix, then I will call them again and get a fourth new router. But you can understand my frustration and what I'm dealing with here. I'm at their mercy, and I don't feel like it's a good idea to necessarily call Comcast tech support in the middle of my live chat, but that's just me. ESPN is too political. Is Fox completely out? Well, yes, Fox is completely out. ESPN is too political. They can be, but they're also a bigger audience. So show us the Predator toy. All right. Let me pull this up. All right. This is the scene from when Dutch is in the jungle. Right? Look at that. I am 5 years old, huh? Pretty cool, right? I got this at an Awesome Con. There we go. There's the back. Predator. I don't have the other ones. I don't have the Predator or the Dutch with the fire or Dutch with the what appears to be a is it the M205, the M206? Which one was the M16 with the grenade launcher on it? God, I have since forgotten. Can't remember now. I believe it's the M206, the grenade launcher, right? But I've been out the game, yo. Yes. So here you have on the left, on the right of your screen, he's got the M. You can see that he's got the M206. There you go. Because I'm a dork. Here we are. Let's finish up this if we can. Oops, hold on. Any words on if cards on ESPN Plus in 2019 will still be shown on Fight Pass? We don't know yet. Will Shorty Torres be the first to defeat Demetrius Johnson? Ooh. That's an interesting question. I'll say sure. Why not? How will switching from Fox Sports to ESPN change the TV production of the broadcast? Boy, it's a great question, and there's just no way to know. When will we receive the return of the super chat after the fights? Did it not pan out? No, it goes great for me. I've just been exhausted because I have like 5 jobs and I get tired. So I just didn't want to work the last weekend, but I think I'll do one for this weekend. I might do a watch party for the Champions League final as well. So we'll see how that goes. Apologies if you answered this already, but who would you like to see Alexei Oleinik fight now that Verdum is out? Boy, that's a good question. Who's out there? Well, okay, so he beat Junior Albini, and he was going to, let's see, go to heavyweight. JDS has a fight. Justin Willis? You could do that one, I guess. I guess you could do Shamil Abdurakhimov. Some of these guys already have fights, so it's hard to say. You could do, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I don't know how you could headline one because Verdum had a bit of a headlining name. I don't think you have the same opportunity with some of those other guys. So that could be kind of difficult. Let's see here. Lots of debates here about what the content will look like. Let's jump back to this. ESPN production quality. Will the UFC retain control? We don't know. I think ESPN could really improve the video and graphics packages. They could. Do you think ESPN will have their own guys doing commentary? I think they'll probably rehire John Anik. And I'm told that the UFC will have some say over getting their guys hired. So I think you're going to hear John Anik back at ESPN. Obviously, you'll hear Rogan on the pay-per-views. They totally control those. I think you will hear the Smiths and everybody else. I honestly do. Now, what's going to happen to like pre-fight shows and post-fight shows and everything else? Karen Bryant or whoever? I don't know. I don't know how that's going to go. Is there going to be a UFC Tonight show or something? I don't know how that's going to work, but I'll be curious to see. Oh, God, this PFT commenter Deadspin story. It's a longer explanation that I don't have time for here. I'm a little bit torn on the story, to be honest. Part of me feels like they're doing it just because they don't like the content on Barstool, which to me would seem petty. On the other hand, if you're asked why is PFT commenter entitled to anonymity, the answer is he's not. He's not. They're not entitled to it. And you can do him a solid if you want. And I suppose like fans want media sources to do other people's solids. But also, I'm not exactly sure what the harm is, to be honest with you. I don't think it's really going to damage his career in any kind of way. He's too well liked for that to matter. So I don't know. Like on the one hand, it's like, why are you going to war just because you don't like their content? Or maybe there's more to it than that. I need to read the story fully. But certainly it feels like there's some animosity driven by that. On the other hand, it's like, is a guy who pretends to be a character who might be benefiting from controversial content entitled to anonymity. If you like that content, you're probably going to say yes. If you don't like that content, and maybe you like Barstool, maybe you don't. I don't really have much of a problem with Barstool. I'm not a consumer of it, but I don't have much of an issue with it. Granted, I'm not much of an expert on it either. But like, what is the argument for like, boy, media has to be silent about his identity? It's not a very strong argument. It's just an argument of, well, you could do him a solid. Okay. But if that's the strongest argument, then it was sort of inevitable that someone would put it out there. So I don't know. I'm kind of on a bit of a middle ground there, to be quite honest with you. All right. With that out of the way, I am sorry about all the questions up front that I could not answer. I just can't answer them. I don't know what you want me to tell you. It's just the position that I'm in right now. I apologize for not being able to answer them, and we appreciate all of your patience here. There will be a resolution to all of this, one way or the other, and I suspect it'll happen as soon as it can. So don't worry. Ariel's got like, 3 weeks left on the site, so there are still some things happening. So thank you. Thank you, everyone who watches this live chat. I appreciate you as well. And yeah, that's all I really have to say. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy UFC Liverpool. There's an MMA beat tomorrow. And until next time, Donk Donkersons, I should say. CAPS, caps. Stay frosty.